get started so we have enough time to cover all of our information. Welcome, new Redhawk families. My name is Lori Prince. I serve as the Director of Parent and Family Engagement at Seattle U. I've been here I just celebrated my 35th year, actually, and have had a variety of positions on campus, and I'm actually the proud parent of a Redhawk alum as well. I'm going to have my colleague introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Kimberly Kaluza. I'm a licensed psychologist and the Director of Counseling and Psychological Services, and I have been with Seattle University for 15 years.
Great. Thanks, Kim. Tonight's presentation we've called Helping Your Hawk Soar. It's really about helping you understand transition issues and things that are kind of normal, particularly in the first year of college. We're probably not going to be able to answer, detailed things about housing or bill paying or those kinds of things, but that's the focus of this, how you can help your student over the course of the summer get prepared for their time at Seattle University. And we're recording this, so it will get put up on the orientation rep website, so don't feel the need to write down everything you see. You'll be able to access it via the recording later, although we do have the Q&A open, and we will try to get to some of those questions as we end our presentation. Okay. So let's see if I can. We know that a lot of things are on your mind right now. Certainly there are on your students, but in years of talking with parents, here are the things that they get to ask me and other folks. I know you weren't. Will they do well in classes? Stay healthy, find friends, change their major. Frankly, that is a common thing for students to do. Please don't panic if they do. It's I think the average now is 3 times that students may change their major in the course of their college career. Will they be safe? Will they stay healthy? All of those kinds of things. And you may have some of your own things beyond what I've put on this page. If they're living on campus, will they get along with their roommates? If they're commuting to campus, how will they find friends and make those connections there? One of the things we know is that your relationship as a parent is evolving as you are with your students at this stage. Maybe this is the first student you have going off to college. Maybe it's one of many, so you've been through this before. But I'd like to ask you to think of your role as changing a bit. You've really probably had a great amount of time invested in managing and caretaking many things for your student as they've been younger, up from birth up through high school, whether it's making appointments, talking with teachers, scheduling the time, all of those kinds of things. And in college, even if your student is commuting, you're really not there in their day-to-day time at the university. And we want your student to be successful, and I know you do as well. So we're talking more about how you can help them self-manage. So if you'd maybe start to think about your role as more becoming a coaching and mentoring role, advising from the sidelines as opposed to a manager of what's going on with your student, that's probably a helpful thing to start doing. College is a different experience than high school, and I want to just talk a little bit about some of those things, right? Their main job while they're here is really their education and kind of that adaptation to independent living, particularly if they're living on campus. They're really trying to figure out who they are in probably a larger and more diverse community than they've been in so far. And while we want students to feel comfortable and at home here, we are not a surrogate home, right? We are a place where they will hopefully grow and stretch. So that means there will be some challenges. Whether intellectually, emotionally, and socially. It is not uncommon for there to be struggles. This is probably the biggest transition they've been through in their life so far for most of them. And as much as we want to, as parents, we can't protect them from all failure and disappointment. And from our perspective, developing some of that grit and resiliency are an important way for them to be successful. Particularly, thank goodness we're out of the heavy days of the pandemic, but everybody has been impacted over the last few years. And so some of those skills now are even more important than ever before. In high school, most of their time during the day was probably spent in class, but it's very unstructured in the university setting. They're probably in class about 15 hours a week, and the rest they have to figure out how to manage how they use that time. Kind of continuing, Professors don't formally take role. We're a small campus. They're not going to be in a large class. Faculty will know if they are there or not, even if they don't spend time taking attendance if they're used to something like that. On a quarter system, the pace of academics is quite accelerated. We're on a 3-quarter system for the academic year. So 3 10-week quarters as opposed to 2 15-week semesters. It goes very quickly. And so, as I said, they're only in class about 15 hours a week. So there's an expectation that a lot of their work will be done outside of classroom. They're learning on their own or reading or writing. For most students, we have students from all over the country and all over the world. They will be with people that they haven't known for years on end. Maybe they've been with the same kids from preschool up through high school or a good chunk of that time. Things like books are not provided. They have to buy or rent books, and we do have our book rental program for textbooks for each quarter, for each class. If they're living on campus, again, they're sharing a room with somebody they probably haven't met, and maybe they've never shared a room before. I know my son had never shared a room when he came to college, and that was one of his biggest transitions. And I'd like to ask you to understand that it is maybe not necessarily the best 4 years of their lives. I think we have this myth in this country, at least, that college is the greatest time, and it's going to be wonderful, and it's the greatest 4 years of your life. I like to say if my best 4 years were when I was between 18 and 22, I'd be a little sad. I would like my best years to always be ahead of me. So, that kind of an expectation makes it really tough for students if they have struggles that are normal struggles for what college has as a big of a transition as this is. So maybe not putting that added weight of, this is going to be the best thing ever that you've experienced so far on them.
Well said, Lori. We're going to dig in a little bit more about this period of time, though, called emerging adulthood. And this was a term that was coined by Dr. Jeffrey Arnett, who's a developmental psychologist. And it is that distinct period of development between adolescence and adulthood, and really in that age span of 18 to 25 years old. The thing about emerging adults is that they often do not see themselves as adolescents anymore, but many also do not see themselves as full-fledged independent adults because they have yet to adopt what are considered the adult roles and responsibilities. So let's talk a little bit about what are these adult roles and responsibilities. In research by Dr. Jennifer Tanner, who's a developmental scientist, individuals considered themselves adults when they took on the following 5 adult responsibilities. So I know you can see them here on the slide, but I'm going to ask you to just, imagine your student and think about them as I read these aloud, and you can kind of assess, yeah, they have some of that, or no, maybe that's something that they will need to develop over the next 5 years. So adults accept responsibility for the consequences of their actions. Adults identify their own personal beliefs and values. They make independent decisions. Adults establish financial independence from parents. And I know that a lot of the parents and supporters on this webinar are looking forward to that day, and it probably hasn't come yet. And adults establish an equal relationship with parents. And obviously that may vary some with different cultural values and different family systems. A lot of this research is within the larger US context, and so it's culturally bound in that way. But I will say that this is usually accomplished by one's late 20s. So developmentally speaking, I know that for me and for some of you out there, 18 used to be like this magic number where you're considered an adult and you can go off on your own. But things have really changed over the last few decades. And that's why we're talking about emerging adulthood and really folks not acquiring all those adult roles and responsibilities until later in their 20s. Also, we used to think that the vast majority of brain development occurred over the first few years of life. However, with technological advances in neuroimaging, we now know that the human brain is actually developing right into a person's mid-20s. So let's talk a little bit about what the developmental tasks of emerging adulthood are. So I'm going to go in depth to some of these bullet points here. In terms of identity exploration, students are experimenting with their identity in the context of often separating from the family home, maybe moving states, changing their residence, possibly moving into a res hall or into other apartment arrangements with other roommates. They're often focused on making new friends and networking for their careers. They are basically pursuing their dreams of who they envision themselves to want to grow into and be as an adult. In terms of worldview, in college, a lot of students are exposed to a wide variety of worldviews and perspectives. So you might notice your student starts questioning the values and beliefs that they may have been raised with and that they brought with them to college. And Lori's going to talk a little bit about the rhythm of each quarter at some point, but I will say that I've noticed that around maybe Thanksgiving break or winter break, that's when you might see your student come home and they sound a little different, or they've made some changes to their identity, and they may start asserting sort of their own values or some new beliefs that they have, or they might be checking them out with you in dialogue. In terms of love and relationships, emerging adults engage in a variety of romantic and sexual experiences, especially since, again, within the larger US culture, there's typically decreased parental monitoring at this time in their life and very little pressure to enter into marriage. A lot of folks entering into college are really looking at developing themselves individually and their careers before entering into marriage. Love tends to become more serious and intimate, emotionally, physically, and sexually. And relationships often last longer than they did in those earlier teen years. Now, in terms of education and work, emerging adults, like Lori said, will often change majors more than once while they're in college. And we notice that many students are seeking internships to develop their skills and, again, network, and some may continue on with graduate school. Your students, Gen Zers, are looking for meaningful work where they can make a difference in the world, in our society, and that meaningfulness tends to be very important to folks. So in summary, in terms of emerging adulthood, it's really a time of feeling very in between, no longer an adolescent, not yet an independent adult, and what's key for all of you to know, still closely tied to parents and family. The research has showed that many emerging adults rely on being able to turn to their parents for trusted guidance. So please know that while we are here to help you successfully launch your student to more adulthood and independence, you also still remain having a very important role to play. Very little has been set in stone, and this is a time of excitement and great possibility for your students.
You mentioned that I talk a bit about the rhythms of the academic year, right? Transition is not an event, it's a process. And so your students may or may not experience some of these things, but these are some things we see typically in the course of the academic year, right? I mean, fall, there's excitement, it's new, but there's also sometimes homesickness and loneliness. Again, they may be with people they've never met before, trying to find new connections and relationships. I think roommates, if your student is living on campus, we typically only hear about what I would call the roommate horror stories, right? You don't always hear about how wonderful most roommate matches are. Roommates don't need to be best friends. They need to be able to share a small space together and respect each other and how they want to be in that space. So those are the things that hopefully will come to fruition for your students. They will question, do I fit in here? Because it will feel a little unsettling at times, and they won't They think, well, did I make the wrong choice? Probably not, but it is not unusual to feel some of that anxiety about, I haven't found my space yet. Kim mentioned kind of that Thanksgiving time, or maybe the winter break, you may see them being differently. They also may be breaking up some old relationships. That's a typical time when that may happen. If they get sick, and if you're not from the Pacific Northwest, it gets a little rainy and chilly. So, and there's students are living in close quarters, so it's not unusual for them to, get a cold, or typically not something very terrible, but it's shared space, and students don't always sleep as much as they should, and so they get a bit run down. Time management is really one of the biggest things they need to try to master it as quickly as they can, given all of the time that they need to figure out on their own. Again, that 15 hours a week in class, meaning there's a lot of time for them to be working on schoolwork outside of class and whatever other responsibilities they might have. This may be the first time they're managing finances on their own. And that's, I'm sure, something that you want to make sure they're on top of. And for many students, even if they went to a fairly large high school, this may be a bigger pond. They might have been top in their class, and all of our students who come here are bright and engaged, and so they're going to be with like folks, and they maybe had not had all of that experience in high school. So fall has a lot of that up and down. They come home for break and spend some time with you, and that's great. And so depending on how that fall quarter went, they may be really excited to start again, or they might have to kind of get into that fresh start mentality. It's not uncommon for students in their first quarter to maybe have grades that are a little bit lower than what they had in high school. Again, what we're asking them to do, how they might have studied then, maybe won't serve them as well in the collegiate environment. So they might be disappointed in how they did. Again, if you're not from Seattle, it can get gray. I'm from the Northeast, so I never think of it as terrible because there's not feet of snow on the ground. But people spend more time indoors, and if the gray bugs them, that may be something. Your students will learn that we don't let the rain stop us doing anything in Seattle. People get out and about and do it anyway because there are months of it. Again, that flu season may come on for folks. And sometimes they're really still searching for a group of friends. Sometimes initially students latch on to a few folks in the fall, but then maybe they learn, like, well, these aren't the folks that I really have as much in common with as I thought. And so they're still kind of trying to find their people. And it's a time when students are starting to kind of think ahead to spring and spring break plans. I will tell you, lots of our students don't go on exotic vacations for spring break. Some do, but some work. Some go on service projects. Some just go home and relax. So it's not an expectation that everybody goes off on a fabulous vacation. I know I didn't get to do that as a student. My son didn't get to do that as a student all the time. There was some work that had to happen to help to continue to pay for college. So those are the things some of our students do. Again, we're on a 3-quarter system, so spring. The second it hits not even 60 degrees in Seattle, people are out in shorts, enjoying the sunnier days, and really it's a beautiful campus with lots of flowers and places to hang out. So students are out doing that. The year can feel long, so they're starting to get maybe some of that burnt out feeling. Students will select their roommate for the next year if they're living on campus again, and maybe it's going to be the person they lived with in the fall, their first year, or maybe it's going to be somebody new. As they're finishing up their term, they also need to be packing up to move out of the halls, even if they were to return to that same room the following fall. We have conferences that live in our halls over the summer, so they need to vacate that space. Probably they're trying to find a summer job. They may be a little apprehensive about turning home for the summer. They maybe came home for a few weeks of winter break, but summer might feel like a long stretch. And they have probably made some new friends or maybe love relationships at school, and there might be some sadness over leaving those folks for an extended period of time.
Okay. Lori and I have been talking a lot to you about this time period and all of the transitions and rhythms of things. So these college readiness skills are really some tips in some ways to help you know what sorts of things that your student may be adjusting to and how you might help them with those things. So as far as self-advocacy goes, I'm thinking about how you can coach your student to speak up for themselves when they need to, which may be in the form of initiating a communication, whether that be a phone call, leaving a voicemail, like when they're trying to make an appointment for student health center or counseling and psychological services, or sending an email. I think a lot of our students are much more proficient than most of us in texting and digital communications, but it tends to be more casual. And sometimes students are really uncomfortable leaving a voicemail and saying, this is my name, this is the phone number you can call me back on, because, you know, folks with landlines, and some of our offices currently have landlines, can't see what's on the iPhone when the iPhone tells you who's calling you. So just teaching them how to speak up for themselves, because that's probably something you've done for them and being their advocate. Lori mentioned time management. And in this area, if your student's struggling because they really need to create their own structure, remind them of sort of the structures that worked for them growing up, whether that's blocks of time and chunking their time with certain things, or building a reliable weekly routine. But having a routine that works for them can be really helpful in getting to all of their tasks and feeling a sense of balance, and making sure that they're also building in time to be social and have social meals and things like that. As far as responsibility goes, they will need to take responsibility for themselves and really be their own manager. For some of you, your students may have been doing that for a time. For others, you might have been, taking care of their appointments and their calendaring and things. So this means that now the students need to communicate to their professors or their supervisors at their jobs when they are going to have absences, or if they have any other concerns that they think would be important for those folks to know. As we mentioned, they'll be exposed to a lot of different perspectives and people from all over. So being able to tolerate ambiguity and the discomfort of so many adjustments. There can be a lot of new adjustments and experiences, and growth and change are often uncomfortable. So just having your student, encouraging them to maintain an open, flexible, and adaptable approach to a lot of things. And I know if they're moving from being at home to being on campus, it's a big difference in terms of living in the res halls. So just being open to a very new experience. And sometimes it's really hard for students to be alone. They may have, they're used to being in a very busy household, and now they're in a res hall, and sometimes the roommates aren't there. So if they need to be reminded on connecting with folks on campus in different ways, but also with home and their friends from home. So the local and the long distance support systems, just remind them to stay connected to those things. Let's see, how to learn from those who are different from them. Again, I would say maintaining an open mind and being open to learning from other people's experiences, just learning about how other people have experienced their life, but also relating and sharing parts of themselves and their experiences. So it's more of a relational sharing. And then we want students to respond to the challenges with resilience, and have that sense of being able to bounce back from things that might feel difficult and might be difficult for them to navigate for the first time on their own. So I think of a couple examples, like we were talking about feeling alone or missing home. Do you think your student would stay in their room and worry that they don't belong and just keep sort of thinking about those things and begin to withdraw? For students who live locally, it can be really tempting not to be in one's discomfort zone and return home on the weekends rather than stay on campus. But I will really caution folks from having their students frequently go home on the weekends, especially within the first couple months, because it's on the weekend where there's more downtime, where students really connect socially, and they'll make new friends. So really encourage your student to stay on campus and get connected to folks. Alternatively, your student may be someone who has those feelings, but it could be helpful to talk to their resident advisor about getting involved. They could look at Connect SU in terms of how to join a club. They could look at university recreation in terms of intramurals. We have lots of opportunities for students to be social and get connected to whatever interests they have. Another example might be if your student is anticipating getting a poor grade. If they start getting anxious, super worried about it, they might begin avoiding the situation and avoiding dealing with it and stop going to class altogether, which could make it worse and more of an academic crisis. So alternatively, it'd be great to coach the student to go to the faculty person's office hours. Let them know what their concerns are. Faculty are there to work with students to help them be successful. They can also join a study group. There's also tutoring through the learning assistance programs. And through all of these adjustments, folks can feel insecure and feel like they're the only one. And I just want to let folks who are supporting students coming to college know their student is not the only one. All of the folks in our office often meet with students who feel like that, and they think they're the only one, but remind them, everyone's trying to put on their brave face and their best image and look like they're doing okay. But a lot of new folks are feeling exactly the same way that your student is. And oftentimes in my department, we wish we could bring them all together so that they could all be friends and realize everyone's going through the same thing. Okay, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about counseling and psychological services, which is the department that I'm attached with. So we go by CAPS for short. And CAPS provides short-term individual counseling. The average number that a student will use in the academic year is 5 sessions, but some students use double that. Some students use much less. It just depends what they're coming in with and what their concerns are. CAPS services don't cost anything. There's no cost. There's no need for insurance. It is confidential under Washington state law. All mental health services are confidential, and it's voluntary. So no one can be forced to come to counseling. It's just we're there if the students want to bounce their concerns off of a licensed practitioner. All the clinical staff are licensed in Washington state as mental health care providers. We have psychologists, licensed mental health counselors, licensed clinical social workers. So we have a variety of different disciplines, but all are licensed in Washington. And then for students who would benefit from more ongoing or longer term counseling, or who may need specialized treatment, our office also helps connect student to referrals to community providers for those needs. And then we also have some more mental health resources that you can check out on our website. And I'll put some links near the end of the presentation where you can find these things. But our department has an online video library series. There's things on finding calm for anxiety, coping with mindfulness skills, talking to others about your mental health concerns, and some weekly self-care. We also provide online anonymous mental health screenings on our website. So students can do anonymous self-assessments for things like anxiety, depression, problematic substance use, eating concerns, and more. And then we also offer students a premium membership to an app. It's a wellness app called Sandvelo. They just download the Sandvelo app. It's an evidence-based self-help app that utilizes cognitive behavioral therapy approaches and mindfulness-based approaches. For example, there's braving anxiety, guided meditations, and also some visualizations and meditations for anxieties around sleep, public speaking, going to the doctor, flying in an airplane. There's a whole host of things there. And again, SU students have free access to a premium membership. They just download the app and log in with their SU email. We also provide students with access to timely care. Timely Care is an independent nationwide telehealth company that SU has contracted with to provide additional medical and mental telehealth services for our students. So students just need to download the Timely Care app and register with their SU credentials. And they will also get this information in the course of orientation, so they'll have more info about it. But I just want to highlight a couple things related to mental health that they can access. Timely Care provides Talk Now, which is 24/7 access to a counselor for immediate emotional support. So it may be in the middle of the night where, I'll just give an example, maybe someone's experienced a breakup and they're very upset and they need to talk to someone. They can use that. Timely Care also offers short-term scheduled appointments, so scheduled counseling. And if you think about it, it's a lot like an EAP or an employee assistance program that a workplace might offer to adults. And scheduling counseling visits are good for after hours and weekends, and also when a student might be outside the state of Washington. So it's very supplemental and can really help with times when CAPS may not be open or students may be away from campus. Okay, next slide. Thanks, Lori. I want to talk a bit about some considerations for setting up your student for success. In terms of thinking about what sort of mental health support they might need or want, I'd ask you to think about discerning how much support does my student need? Do I think they might need this occasionally as things come up in life? Or is there an ongoing health concern that they may need support with for the next 4 or 5 years? So to set your student up for success, I would recommend establishing with a local long-term healthcare provider for the next 4 or 5 years, if any of the following apply. If your student is currently diagnosed and undergoing treatment, and maybe see someone regularly, that may be weekly or monthly, but they've already been diagnosed and it's something that they're going to manage for the next 4 or 5 years, it'd be lovely for them to get set up with an ongoing provider who's available to them in an unlimited sort of way. Also, if your student has a history of recovery that may be from substances, eating disorder, at an inpatient or outpatient level, again, it may be good for them to have an ongoing therapist in the area. And then if they have a history of hospitalization or inpatient treatment in the last year, then short-term therapy usually isn't the level of treatment someone should have access to. They should have more unlimited and more frequent treatment for the next year. So those are some things I would be thinking about in terms of what level of mental health support might my student be needing in the upcoming year.
We also know that this is a time where things are happening for you, right? It's not just the student that is going through change. You are changing in your level of parental responsibility and kind of establishing your identity as a parent of an emerging adult. So we want to make sure that we just at least acknowledge some of those things, right? It's a new family dynamic, whether this is the only child in the home or one has left, and there are other siblings left there, and it's a different thing going on for all of you together in the home. I know it was, it's a little bit of both sides, managing your own emotions as your student grows up. There's pride, but there's also some sense of loss or change and worry that comes as our students get to this next level in their life. If they're here, you're not going to be as privy to things in their everyday existence as you have been in the past. And, you're really working on that adult to adult relationship that Kim mentioned a little bit ago. You may feel that void. And so you may have your own ups and downs, or you can expect them from your students. And again, kind of asking you to move from that caretaking role to more of a coaching role as your student enters this time in their lives. You're already helping by participating in this webinar and learning about some of these things related to what a standard transition to college is like. And I think we want some of the same things as you do. I know we want your students to feel confident and competent in their skill set to handle whatever might come their way. So conversations that you can have over the summer to help them feel that confidence would be really helpful. Again, asking them really to take that responsibility. Kim mentioned that in terms of what are adult and college readiness skills. Really helping them understand, as Kim mentioned, they all think that they're the only ones who are maybe struggling or feeling uncomfortable. They are all feeling it. None of them want to say that they're experiencing that when they're with their peers. The more you learn about the university, so you can maybe guide your student to contact the appropriate resources if they encounter a challenge, would be helpful. We certainly hope that they will be involved in something beyond their academics. Obviously, that is a primary thing, but what we know in terms of students feeling good about their university experience and connected is for them to have something beyond, whether it's a club or a work position. We have over, I think, about 150 student clubs and organizations on campus. If we don't have something they're interested in, it's actually quite easy to start a club. So that's something to look at. If they have work study or are thinking of working, they may see things that say that they could work up to 20 hours a week when they're a full-time student. Frankly, I worked with our orientation program and first-year students for about 25 years. 20 hours is too much for first-year students first quarter. 10 to 12 or 15 hours a week in a job or other kinds of things helps them structure their time, gives them some other connections, but also lets them have time to focus on their academics. As Kim mentioned, they will still turn to you as a resource. So we ask that you start thinking more about really that listening piece, but maybe not fixing the problems like you may have in the past as a parent. And it's always hard for us to let them make mistakes, but that's frequently how we learn important lessons. And hopefully in the collegiate framework, it's not such a traumatic lesson that it's going to mark them for life. You'll definitely, I know, be reaching out, but you might not get a response quickly. Students are very busy. They'll tell you that, but whether it's their class or hanging out with their friends or they're working or checking out Seattle, they have a lot on their plate. So they might not reach out and return a text or a phone call right away. Now, if you continue to reach out and you don't get any response, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll try to make a contact with your student. There's a phenomenon that happens in the summer before a student goes to college that I like to call messing the nest. It fits with our Redhawk theme, so that's why I use that language. But sometimes, you're maybe hoping for a summer where you're going to do a whole bunch of things with your students, these final weeks and months that you have together. But they might be pulling away or maybe a little more challenging in their interactions with you. Sometimes it makes it easier for them to make that leap in the fall if it hasn't been the smoothest summer. And frankly, sometimes it makes it a little bit easier for you to say, yep, it's time for you to be on your own. So I think it reminded me of going back to some of that adolescent time where they're testing you in different ways and that challenging time of parenting. So that may happen for you. And please understand that it's really, again, just part of that transition and separation. And I'd ask you to be ready for, again, something I call the dump call or text. You may reach out to your student, in the first week or couple weeks or somewhere in the academic year and, are hoping to just hear how things are going. Maybe they just walked out of a test and they don't feel really good about it. Maybe they had a disagreement with a friend or a roommate. And you're the person who may get all of that anxiety. You're that safe space for them. You love them no matter what. So sometimes you get all of their challenge. I don't like my roommate. The professor doesn't like me. I don't like my classes, whatever it is. They give you that. They hang up or stop the text. And 9 times out of 10, they are really just fine and move on and have decided to go have some pizza with their friends. So again, it might be that they're really struggling, but please know that very frequently it's a gift our kids give us because we're the safe space to deposit some of those anxieties. So that may happen for you. I'd like you to think about having what I call these 10 5-minute conversations over the course of the summer. This is not a sit down and go through all of these things, for a few hours, but maybe you're on a walk, walking the dog, maybe you're doing dishes, preparing dinner, whatever. But here are some things we think it's important for you to discuss with your student. And these are just in alphabetical order, not necessarily order of importance. So again, kind of what are they hoping for academically? How are the choices they're making aligning with this? And again, we talked about they may transition out of a major that they thought for sure this is what I want to do, but they learned something new in college. And again, that's okay for them to make some of those changes. Alcohol and drugs, what are your expectations and values? They have listened to you. They know hopefully know how you feel about those things, and what might they do when they're confronted with some of those choices and peer pressure. Budgets and finances, what do you expect in terms of what they might help contribute? Will they have a job? What will that money be used for? Those kinds of things. Communication, again, how often and how do you want to communicate with your student? Is it something that's going to happen regularly? Because again, we have so much access to technology now in a different way that you can be in touch with them all the time. That health and wellness piece, so many students don't necessarily do some basic things that help their overall wellness in terms of getting enough sleep or exercise. Hopefully in their decision making around food in the residence hall on campus, they're choosing some healthy things. They could choose chicken strips every day. We hope they are not, because that is certainly not the only thing available to them. There are lots of healthy options, but how are they doing that? How are they fitting those important things into their lives? Again, I talked a bit about involvement. We hope they'll explore and engage in some things they're passionate about, or some things they're going to learn about that they didn't know about before. And it's helpful if they really kind of choose a few things and not so many things that they can't really engage and know about the activity or get to know the people who have that similar interest. Sex and relationships, again, Kim mentioned how love and relationships change and grow more intimate in the college environment and years potentially. So again, what are your expectations around those things? City street smarts. We are in the middle of downtown Seattle. Now, we are a safe campus. We have our own 24/7 campus public safety folks. But if people haven't lived in the city, they need to be a little more aware as they're walking around. We would always, obviously, we'll talk to students about safety when they get here, but we want them to not be afraid, certainly, but to be smart about being out in the city. Study habits. I mentioned earlier that how they studied in high school might not serve them as well in college. What adaptations might they need to make? We have learning assistance programs, tutoring, study groups, Kim had mentioned, lots of things, test taking workshops. What we know is students who take advantage of those kinds of things are the best students. They are good students who want to become better. We don't want students to think that if I'm using those resources, it means that I'm a terrible student. These things are there to help them become better students, and hopefully they can frame their thoughts about some of those services in that way. And again, work. Will they work on campus or off? How much? What do they need to do as part of that? One of the things, if they're in a position on campus, I will tell you, is that it's another person to ask how they're doing. We have students who work in our office. And so, we're always asking them, how are classes going? What are you studying? Do you have an exam coming up? Are you preparing? Are you finding clubs? So it's just typically another adult to check in and ask some questions about their connections, and hopefully be able to make some suggestions about resources if they need those. Technology, I talked a bit about, we can be in constant contact. I'd ask you to think, should you? I'm not saying you should or shouldn't. I just ask you to think about those. How do you balance that challenge and desire to stay close and connected while giving your students that space that they need to mature and grow? And who is initiating that contact and how often? Is it you or is it your student? I know not many students use Facebook as much anymore, but are you Facebook friends with your student? Again, not saying you should or shouldn't be, just asking you to contemplate that and, follow them on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, whatever they might be engaged in social media. I can tell you the thing that has not gone out of style is if you send them a care package or a handwritten note, they are still beloved by students. Now, the thing they have to do is remember to check their on-campus mailbox, which if they're living on campus in the residence halls, they will have a mailbox there. But those are things that are always appreciated. And certainly a care package with maybe it's photos of family or siblings, or, frankly, the family pet will be missed considerably. Dog, cat, fish, whatever it might be. Students frequently miss their pets quite a bit. And certainly any little special snacks or cookies or treats like that. Their friends on the floor will flock to their room to get a little treat as well.
I'll highlight we'll both highlight some of the resources. I know, Lori, you'll talk a little bit more about your office in a minute or so, but I wanted to say a bit about the Student Health Center. The Student Health Center is our primary medical care clinic on campus for students. The cost for a visit, there's a $5 administrative fee. And if a student has to have labs, there may be some minimal and additional lab costs. But I just want folks to know that any student can use the Student Health Center regardless of if they have insurance, if they don't have insurance, regardless of which health insurance they have. This is really meant to be very minimal cost for any and all of our students. And then I did mention CAPS already. That's short-term, no-cost individual psychotherapy. Lori, would it be okay if I answer, because this is sort of resources and questions, answer a couple of questions that are helpful?
Go right ahead.
Okay, so I just want to say, I'll answer a couple of these questions, and if other folks have really specific and individualized healthcare questions about their students' health history, current health needs, you can always call CAPS to consult with one of our licensed providers and speak more personally around that. And I think while I'm looking at these questions, I'll probably answer one. I'll answer both of them, but I'll also put in a bunch of links as an answer to one because I can't start a new page. So one of the questions is it fairly easy for students to get counseling appointments or difficult due to the number of students seeking counseling? So historically, it's been interesting the last few years. The pandemic has changed our patterns. And like I said, I've been with CAPS for 15 years. But historically, I will tell you that by late October, sometimes, not last year, students could get appointments consistently throughout the whole year. But sometimes in late October, things might start to logjam a bit. So it could be harder in late October and early November. And then it seems to open up and breathe again when students go on break. But when folks come back, from Thanksgiving break, when they come back from that, there tends to be some open appointments. So late October, early November, potentially a logjam at CAPS specifically. And then I'd say spring quarter, interestingly, May is one of our highest utilization months, right before students are heading out in June. So those times things can get crowded. However, I will say, like I mentioned, we now have this supplemental service through Timely Care. So students can talk to someone immediately 24/7 through Talk Now, and they can also do scheduled counseling through Timely Care. And I think it's 12 sessions per academic year. So there are some additional options that can assist folks in having routes to a very timely appointment, regardless of which service they use. The other question was, do we need to have a Washington State healthcare provider, or can we keep our California provider? So I'm going to also put links as a response to this one so everyone can see the links. And then we answered the other one live. So in terms of healthcare provider and keeping maybe a long distance California provider, it would depend. So you want to talk to that provider about it. Ask your current established provider in California or whichever state folks may be in and be in the same situation, if they think that managing whatever the condition is the student has is something that is manageable long distance. And what are the intervals in which the student is planning to come back and maybe see the person, the provider in person. So that provider can let you know what they think is a good treatment plan, or if the provider will help maybe bridge to a provider in Washington State if they think that's important. And we can always help with referrals for things, but you'll want provider to provider communication if a new provider is going to be involved while the student's in Washington State.
Right. I mean, I think for any health insurance situation, there are so many different providers that you have to check with your provider about what might be covered here versus at home kind of thing. So we can't answer that specifically for any provider. That's really more of a conversation for you with your provider to make sure that your student will be able to do what they need, even, yeah.
I think so. In terms of the resources, I mentioned Student Health Center, I mentioned CAPS, Timely Care. We also have an office called Wellness and Health Promotion, and they do a lot of more, like Lori was mentioning, learning around, what are ways to feed, nourish your body. And they do a lot more education around health topics. They also do some really fun events around finals time called De-Stress with Dogs, where dogs are brought in and students can spend time with them and they really enjoy that. Lori also mentioned our gray skies and how sometimes that can really get to folks if they're coming from sunnier, bluer sky climates. And at Wellness and Health Promotion, they have some of the light therapy or happy lamps, and students can check them out. And I think they can check them out for a month at a time. And if they really like them, to be honest with you, I know Wellness and Health Promotion is full of kind people. They'll let you keep it longer. But that can be really helpful if a student wants to see it. Oh, am I being affected by the gray skies here? Also known as seasonal affective disorder or the winter blues. Lori, do you want to talk about orientation staff? And okay.
So I've got a bunch of other things listed here as resources for your student. They will, when they arrive, meet some student orientation leaders, some peer leaders who will help them in the transition when they're here. They probably have already met some of the folks. We have a student worker in the office, and some of the orientation staff are behind the scenes at the variety of orientation virtual sessions all summer. We mentioned the resident advisors. Each floor in the residence halls has a couple of student peer leaders on there. There's also a full-time master's level professional who lives in the building, who's there. If your student commutes, we have a special space for commuter students, and there's some staff there. They'll have an academic advisor. The Center for Student Involvement is basically our student activities area. Obviously, their faculty and campus ministry is there for any students. It's one of the offices where I see students hanging out all the time, whether chatting, studying, having lunch in there. It's just a comfy place to be. So those are some of the things, and there are folks here in a variety of ways that will help your student adapt and be a good resource for them. Having trouble with my getting these. There we go, getting my slides to roll. So I said, I'm the director of parent and family engagement. And so this office is actually here for you to help you learn more about how to navigate the university, or, if questions come up, where can I either answer the question for you myself or to direct you or your student to the resource. So you'll get newsletters from me once a month in terms of kind of what's coming up or things we're hoping you'll encourage your student to do. We'll do some webinars throughout the academic year so you can learn a little bit more in depth about campus resources. There's a lot of information on our website there. And then we do have a Facebook group for parents. So it's really mostly a parent to parent conversation with some offices that can provide some information in there as well. But if you want to connect with other SU parents, it's a great place. parents@seattleu.edu is the email you can use to ask anything, and there's a phone number there. And I've put a little date for family weekend. If you're thinking about when can I see my student after they've arrived here, we do a family weekend program in the fall. It'll be October 20th to the 22nd. Some folks just come and say it's family weekend, so I'm coming to campus. They talk with their student about that, and they don't do anything on the schedule. They just hang out and have family time. Some people do everything in the calendar. We have social activities, some educational things, but you'll get information and an invitation in early September for that.
All right, so folks, do remember your student has one foot in each of these worlds, and so do you. There's a lot of change and adjustment going on. Be patient with your students and with yourself, especially. And a lot of times your relationship with your student will improve. Please remember, like I mentioned, you are still critically important to them, and they're going to be looking to you for guidance. Also, give yourself credit. I want to say congratulations to you. You have prepared them for this, and you're ready to launch them. Lori, are there questions that maybe you want to answer live?
Yep, we're going to try to do a few here.
Okay.
Also, want to remind folks that if you have questions about the orientation sessions this summer, please feel free to reach out to the orientation group. In the email that came to you last week, it talked about the variety of sessions that you could be in with your student. So I'm just putting that back up there, but you can see that info on the orientation page. Somebody asked about, will students need their social security card? If they're going to get a job, they probably will for paperwork associated with the job. So that would be yes for that. Trying to think of some other things. You talked about the happy lamp. So if students have their own, sure, bring it. But if they don't, and they don't know if they need one, they can certainly check those out from Wellness and Health Promotion.
Yes.
The Student Health Center does not fill prescriptions. It is not a pharmacy, but we are in walking distance of a number of pharmacies if students need prescriptions filled. And so I'm trying to think. And folks will be on my parent mailing list. If you've received something already, you're on. And if you choose that you want to opt out at some point in the year, that's your option as well. But yes, we opt everybody in and let you opt out. We figure more info is better than not. There was a question about bed rails, and I'm not 100% sure, frankly. So again, the housing folks will be doing a number of these virtual orientation sessions this summer, and I encourage you to reach out to them to attend those, or for housing related questions, housing@seattleu.edu is the place where you can get the best information about some of those housing pieces. And your students have hopefully already applied for their housing if they are going to live on campus. And I know they're in the roommate selection time, or where students can try to find a roommate, or certainly housing can help connect them with somebody.
I think there's a question about if folks need to register in advance as a new patient to use the student health clinic, and no, you don't need to do. You just call them to make an appointment, and they'll walk you through whatever information they need.
You know, I know there's some of the big things coming up are their students advising 101 sessions and course registration. And those are ones actually that we would ask parents not to engage in. They are group sessions. If your student is not able to do those, I believe they should have received information and who to contact within their college. All of the colleges, schools and colleges do their advising and registration pieces a little bit differently. So they can reach out there to see, what do I do if I'm, out of the country and can't do it virtually. Everything is virtual this summer, so they do not need to come to campus for anything like that. But if there's a challenge with the timing, please have them reach out to that via that advising email that they received to make sure they can get registered for courses, because that they will do this summer. And it's a little different process than they'll do when they are here for other quarters. It's just how we bring them all in. So if folks are not on the parent mailing list, if you did not receive something last week, or, I'm assuming you are, if you got access to this email, to this webinar, but if not, please just email me at parents@seattleu.edu, your name, your student's name, and we'll see how we're missing you there. And we are recording this particular webinar, so again, you don't need to remember everything. And also a good number of the webinars that are happening this summer for students that you can sit in on will also be recorded and posted on the orientation webpage a few days after it's done. I know we're already over time. I see a question about shipping items beforehand. Yes, they can. You can ship items beforehand, but please, nothing coming to the residence halls before September 7. They don't have enough space. Your students in late July, early August will learn their housing assignment and the address that you would use to ship them things. So that's, but please don't ship it before September 7. That the poor housing folks will be inundated with boxes for, hundreds of students in each residence hall. There's just not the space to store it all.
Lori, there's a couple questions about prescriptions. And so I'm going to defer to the Student Health Center and say it'd be best to contact them and consult about prescriptions going across state lines or mailed prescriptions, because it varies. The laws vary state by state, and all of our prescribing providers are in the Student Health Center. So they would have that information.
Great. Okay. Well, we thank you all for joining us tonight. I know we kind of shared a whole bunch of information. Again, we are excited to have you as part of our Redhawk family as well. Again, please feel free to reach out to parents@seattleu.edu if you have a question. And if I can't answer it for you, I can direct you to the right resource. But we hope we get to meet you in September when students move in. Thanks and have a great evening.
Congratulations, everybody.
Yes, you did it. You have launched a student practically into college. That is a big deal.
Bye.